Hello everybody. Before I introduce our next speaker, once again, I would like to let you know that there's a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So type your questions in if you have any that pop up during the session. Before we exercise our stomach muscles, aka lunch session, we're going to do some warm-ups. And to bring us through that, we have Miss Siow Ee, who will be talking more about the variation of warm-ups. She is one of the strength and conditioning coaches at the Singapore Sports Institute, currently working with teams such as Wushu, Taekwondo and Hockey. She graduated from Nanyang Technological University with a bachelor's degree in sports science and management. She was also involved in research on the effects of post-activation performance enhancement using different modes of exercises and comparing the effect of using different variable resistance intensities on jumping performance. With that, please take the stage, Siow Ee.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Singapore Sports Science Symposium 2020. I'm Siow Ee, and I'm one of the strength and conditioning coach at the Singapore Sports Institute. Today, I'll be talking about how we can include high-intensity exercises during our warm-up to enhance sport performance. Warm-up. As I mentioned this word, does it ring a bell to any of you? Indeed, this is a common term said by coaches, heard by athletes, before every training, before any form of testing, and especially before competition. Athletes perform warm-up on a regular basis, either because they are told to do so, or they feel that it helps them to improve their subsequent sporting performance. We know that warm-up is essential for elite performance, and since athletes do it on such a regular basis, especially before their competition, how do we then make sure that the warm-up that they are doing are the one that can maximize their performance and also in reducing their risk of injury? So how does warm-up actually lead to the said benefits? The effect of warm-up can be divided into physiological aspect and also the psychological aspect. In physiological aspect, there is a temperature-related effect relating to the muscle and also the core temperature. While in the non-temperature related effect is mainly related to the cardiorespiratory system. While the psychological effect of warm-up is mainly revolved around the cognitive function. As we engage in physical activities, there will be an increase in our muscle temperature and eventually our core temperature. This will help in increasing the elasticity of muscle tissue and potentially allowing a greater range of motion. It will also lead to a faster cross-region cycling rate, which is influenced by the temperature-sensitive myosin ATP phase reaction, hence resulting in a higher muscular power output. Lastly, it will also improve the quality of neural activation, hence enabling faster muscle contraction and allows faster relaxation of both agonist and antagonist muscle, which is an important consideration in the speed of movement. When we talk about muscle contraction, there's an interesting phenomenon of muscle contraction known as the trap or the staircase effect, where subsequent muscle contraction is affected by the previous contractions. For activities where maximum muscle contraction are required, there's a need for progressively higher intensity muscle contraction to precede the activity. Moving on to the non-temperature related aspect, which mainly related to the cardiorespiratory system, our body have a store of high energy substances, mainly ATP and ATP-PCR, which are always available to enable instant movement. But these are inefficient in terms of the overall energy production and can only sustain exercise for a short time periods. The use up of such substances will lead to an increase in the production of carbon dioxide to the working muscle. We know that carbon dioxide is a toxin within the body and its build-up will trigger responses to remove it via our cardiorespiratory system, which is done by increasing in the breathing rate and the depth, as well as the diversion of the blood flow directly to the working muscle to remove this excessive carbon dioxide. By doing so, this will also progressively activate our aerobic energy system. And we all know that optimal performance does not only solely depends on physiology, the athletes must be psychologically prepared for the activity as well. So a well-planned warm-up can facilitate the psychological preparedness of an athlete. There's an intricate link between psychological and also physiological factor. This can be shown in the flight or the fight responses, whereby stress can result in physiological change of state, which can affect the level of physical performance and an increase in the excitatory state of an athlete. Clearly, in order for an athlete to maximize their subsequent performance during their training or the competition, a well-designed and a well-executed warm-up is needed to address the physiological, the skill, and also the psychological aspect. So the most common structure used by coaches traditionally consists of two phases: a general phase, which generally aim at producing the temperature-related benefit of a warm-up. This is done by a period of aerobic exercises, starting with low intensity and slowly building up. After which, it will be usually followed by a period of stretching, typically static in nature. However, there's also a recent trend to actually shift from static stretching to a more dynamic stretching. After which, it will be a specific phase, which consists of performing activities that resemble the upcoming requirement of the training session or the competition, such as engaging in a small-sided game. So a problem that might arise from this traditional structure of warm-up is that during the general phase of warm-up, it only involves light cardio activities and stretching. It might not stimulate the cognitive function. As often, athletes performing such activities will have little concentration on the task. While in the specific phase is usually varied in nature, and it might not progressively increase in intensity, which is an important aspect if the athlete wishes to perform at high level of speed, strength, or power. With that said, we will actually need a much more focused structure to be developed. So the RAMP warm-up protocol is proposed by Dr. Ian Jeffrey, with consideration given to the short-term aim of warm-up and also for the long-term aim of the athlete's overall athletic development. So this RAMP protocol consists of three phases: the race phase, activation and mobilization phase, and the potentiation phase. He suggested that this is a systematic structure which optimizes the contribution of each element to the warm-up, and each element of the warm-up will contribute positively to the next. It also ensures that all activities are sequenced in a manner that has each phase progressively building on the previous phase. So during the race phase, it's actually aiming at raising the key physiological parameters, such as increasing our muscle and core temperature, the diversion of blood flow, just to list out a few. And at the same time, it will help with activating the aerobic system while not overly inducing fatigue in the anaerobic system as well. As compared to the general warm-up phase in the traditional warm-up, where athletes only engage in 5 to 10 minutes of light aerobic activities, this race phase will also aim at achieving the skills and movement development. So this can be done via two types of race protocol: the movement development protocol, which focus on the key locomotor patterns, such as the acceleration, deceleration, and changing of direction movement, listing a few. And moving on to the skill development protocol. So the skill development protocol will be the use of key skills related to the sport to raise the key physiological parameters. Progression can be done in three ways: either in the form of intensity, so from the low intensity to moderate intensity, which is the most common way of progression. Secondly, is from simple movement to a complex movement, such as from doing a simple acceleration drills to combining acceleration plus change of direction. A low cognitive challenge to a high cognitive challenge, such as from a planned change of direction drills to adding in the voice or visual stimulation, such as doing a partner challenge change of direction or reacting to the instruction of the coach. As we can see, in this race phase, we have already addressed the psychological aspect of the warm-up. So a summary, it should only be 5 to 10 minutes so as to not to induce fatigue. You should start with low intensity and ensure that there's a gradual increase to the intensity. And take note that it should not include any high intensity activities, as this will be covered in the potentiation phase instead. So this video is a race protocol that I do with my Taekwondo athletes. So do note that the video is being speed up. So as you can see, she starts off with a simple locomotor patterns, some shufflings, after which I make her to combine all the movement so that it be more complex. Further adding the knee raise so that it will stimulate the attacking drills. And lastly, I added in the cognitive challenge, such as reacting to commands to reach for the different colored codes. Adding in knee raise again, stimulating the attacking drills. So next up, the race phase should have already allowed the body to move more effectively and efficiently throughout a greater range of motion. Now is the optimal time for us to begin the activation and the mobilization phase. So in this phase, we are basically focusing on building effective fundamental movement pattern through a full range of motion, and also to initiate an increase of the muscle activation, which will be optimally developed in the potentiation phase. So this phase can be used to develop appropriate activation pattern, which include the shoulder activation, the core activation pattern, foot activation, and lastly, the glutes activation patterns. While for the mobilization, you will not only focus on individual muscle, like how it's being traditionally done during the static stretching, but rather on mobilizing or actively moving the body through movement pattern and range of motion that they will be required to master for their sport. So this RAMP protocol will focus on mainly 4 primary mobilization patterns. So firstly, the squat pattern, the lunge pattern, brace pattern, and lastly, the single leg stance pattern. So this movement can be initially isolated, allowing more focus to be placed on the technique. Once the competency is being demonstrated, it can be combined to provide a movement challenge to reflect the challenges they might face in their sport, such as doing a lunge pattern with a rotation. So this video will show the activation and the mobilization exercises that I do in my Taekwondo athletes. So as you can see, core activation pattern plus shoulder activation pattern with the help of the bands around the wrist. So I do different variation of the core activation, targeting the anterior core, posterior core, and also the rotational core. So some bender activation exercises for the glutes. So I also work on the balancing on one leg, which is a common stance in Taekwondo sparring. Some bender work to further activate the glutes. So next up, this will be working more on the mobilization. Okay, so as we can see, this is a brace pattern. Brace pattern combined with a lunge pattern. So as we can see that I do not only work on a single pattern, single movement pattern itself. I usually combine them to save time. So lunge pattern with a rotation, as you can see. Okay, different lunge pattern. So I do not only work on the forward lunges, I also work on the lateral lunge. So as you can see that I really make them go into their full range of motion. So next up is a squat pattern with some thoracic work. Right, brace pattern again. So as you can see that I usually, the recommended reps or sets, right, is really just 1 to 2 reps, 1 to 2 set of 3 to 5 reps. Okay, next up is the single leg stance pattern. As mentioned, is a very common stance that they use in their Taekwondo sparring. So some hip mobility work. Do take note that the video is being speed up, but when we are doing it, when we are doing it in reality, it should be a controlled movement. So in this phase, as we can see, I'm focusing a lot on the glutes and also the core activation pattern, the lunges as well. Because in Taekwondo sparring competition, the lower body is actually predominantly used, while lesser on the upper body. So it shows the importance of the specificity to the sport. If the sport actually uses more upper body extensively, we can add in more shoulder activation and mobility exercises instead. So as mentioned, I will be performing 1 to 2 sets or 3 to 5 reps of it and make sure that they go through control motion. Okay, next up, since this phase is talking about activation and mobilization, we can also look at if performing static stretching is going to add benefit to our performance, or would it be detrimental instead? So in a systematic review paper that reviewed the effect of acute static stretching on maximal muscle performance, it has been suggested that short duration acute static stretch of less than 30 seconds has no detrimental effect, while a stretch duration of 30 to 45 seconds also imparted no significant detrimental effect. But if we were to hold a stretch for more than 60 seconds, a significant reduction is likely to occur. So from a performance enhancement point of view, it doesn't seem to add any benefit to enhancing the performance, but at least it doesn't cause any significant detrimental effect if being done correctly. Hence, the athletes can perform static stretching if it's not excessively, such as less than 30 seconds or even just up to 45 seconds. And if the athletes actually feel the need to do so, especially for sport, such as Taekwondo, as you can see, it requires her to go to her maximum range of motion during the competition. Okay, and lastly, it should be supplemented with other phases of warm-up. So moving on, which is the potentiation phase. After our muscle have been mobilized and also activated, we can now progress. As mentioned about the trap or the staircase effect of muscle contraction, where the subsequent muscle contraction are affected by the previous, it shows that it's important to prepare the body for maximum function. Hence, the aim of this phase will be to increase the intensity to a comparable level that the athletes are about to compete in, and also aim to increase the subsequent performance, often by the use of post-activation performance enhancement, PAPE. So this phase is very common for sprinter or even Olympic weightlifter, because they will have to progressively build up their speed and lift load in order for them to reach their maximum performance during the competition. However, it was also common for team sport, court sport, or combat sport to omit this phase totally, not knowing that maximum performance, such as a sprint, a jump, or a maximum speed kick, is also vital in their success. In summary, this phase should take about 5 to 10 minutes. It should be movement, skill focus, or a combined focus, and to involve high intensity exercises. They are highly sports specifics. So with respect to acute performance enhancement, much attention has been given to the effect of PAPE that can bring about to our sport performance. So why is PAPE so popular among practitioners? So PAPE has shown to be able to improve jumping and sprinting performance acutely by 1 to 13%. So what does this number actually signify? Let us take a look at the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. This is the 100-meter sprint men's finals. So the difference between the third place and the first place is only about 1.02%. Hence, in elite sport setting, 1% difference can actually mean a big difference in the medal table. So this picture shows the importance of the maximum power and speed during sports, which might actually benefit from the use of PAPE. So PAPE refers to the enhancement of measures of maximum strength, power, and speed following a conditioning contraction. There are different modalities that have been used to induce a PAPE effect, with varying factors affecting the outcomes. The type of conditioning activities include lifting of free weights of maximal or near maximal intensity, performing resisted sprint, lifting of heavy weights with the addition of variable resistance, performing single or multi-joints isometric conditioning activities, performing parametric exercises, either unweighted or with the additions of resistance, and lastly, performing ballistic movement with variable resistance. This is a review paper by my colleagues and I. So do note the change in the terminology from post-activation potentiation in the past to PAPE now. So the papers that I'll be sharing are submitted before the suggestion of the different terminology. So in this review, we explore the different modalities used to induce PAPE effect on sport-related performance. And also we provided recommendation on the advantages or the disadvantages of using each modalities. So free weight exercises are the most common conditioning activities used to elicit PAPE effect. So it comprises of back squats, a deadlift, or Olympic lift and is derivative. The intensity used are between 50 to 90% 1RM, and parallel squat has been shown to be more effective than a quarter squat in inducing this PAPE effect. This was suggested to be due to the increased activation in the gluteus maximus from a lower squat depth. So one consideration for this modality is on the strength level of the athletes, as individuals with greater maximum strength has shown to respond better to such modality. This has been suggested to be due to the possibility of greater composition and cross-sectional area of type 2 muscle fiber in stronger athletes, as PAPE effect is most prominent in muscle with a higher proportion of type 2 fibers. So in addition, stronger athletes are also more fatigue resistant. So by performing free weights conditioning activities, has shown to be able to enhance jump performance in terms of jump height, sprint performance, and also sport-specific performance such as the shot put distance and the throw velocities. So for resisted sprint conditioning activity, it can be done using the sled pull or the pushers. So performing 1 reps of 15-meter sprint, sled pull or push with 75% of body weight has shown to be the optimal in inducing the PAPE effect. It was suggested that the sled push or pull of 125 to 150% of body weight is too heavy to induce PAPE effect, as it might have led to changes in the sprinting technique, such as an increased trunk lean angle or the hip joint angle, which ultimately cause disruption to the normal acceleration kinematics. So while intensity of 20 to 30% body weight could have been too light to induce PAPE effect instead. So this method of conditioning activity might only be suitable for athletes training on field or artificial surface, as it might cause damage to the sled or the ground if it's being used on other surfaces. Currently, it has only been done on sprint performance. Hence, the current data only support the use of resisted sprint as a conditioning activity to improve sprint performance. Next up, free weight plus variable resistance can be done by using bands or chains to add variable resistance to like squat or bench press. So it has been suggested to replace 15 to 35% of the total load with variable resistance, and it has shown to be more effective than performing free weights conditioning activities alone. The inclusion of variable resistance could have allowed for a greater loading beyond the sticking point. Thus, maintenance of maximal force development through the range of motion will be required. The better in performance could also be due to the greater muscle activity during the eccentric phase, causing greater muscle stiffness and also a faster stretch shortening cycle. It was also shown that this method of conditioning activities has resulted in a shorter rest time to elicit the PAPE effect, such as just 90 seconds, as compared to more than 5 minutes are required for the free weights alone. Hence, it suggests that variable resistance may induce less fatigue when the same loads is lifted. So by performing free weights plus variable resistance has shown to improve jump performance, improve sprint performance, and also the 1 repetition maximal performance. So moving on, isometric exercises is characterized by a contraction of muscle without a change in joint angle. So it can be done for single joint, such as the isometric knee extension, or the multi-joint, such as the isometric leg press or the isometric back squat. It can be done by exerting force against an immovable object, such as a wall, a fixed bar, or a machine to attain maximal isometric contraction. So current studies suggested that maximum contraction of 3 to 5 seconds per repetition for 3 repetitions with 1 to 5 minute rest period seems to be the optimal dosage to induce PAPE effect. So contraction duration that are too long, such as up to 10 seconds, might have induced too much fatigue instead. So we should be using multi-joint exercises at joint position similar to the initiation of propulsion phase of the tested movement will be recommended, which is this is due to the mechanical specificity. And this can be used when the free weights are not available, such as at a competition venue, as it could be done by just using a towel or even immovable objects that can be found. So I have shown that it could improve jumping performance in terms of the counter movement jump and also the drop jump. So parametric exercises are movements that involve the stretch shortening cycle, characterized by a rapid eccentric, followed by a short amortization phase, and also a ballistic concentric movement. The commonly used lower body parametric includes the drop jump from the various heights, counter movement jump, weighted or unweighted, hurdle jumps, box jump, and bounding. So while upper body parametric conditioning activities include bench press throw and also ballistic push-up. Parametric conditioning activity, be it weighted or unweighted, has been effective in inducing the PAPE effect. Current studies suggested that we should add addition of 30% 1RM or 10% body weight to be added to parametric to provide an overloading for better PAPE effect. This is suggested to be due to the trap effect of the muscle contraction. Hence, when the resistance is removed subsequently, more motor unit would have already been recruited from the previous weighted jump, hence producing an even larger power output. So parametric exercises could also be slightly more effective than performing free weights conditioning activities, as parametric are associated with a preferential recruitment of the type 2 motor unit. As mentioned, PAPE is most prominent in muscle with a high proportion of type 2 fibers. So parametric conditioning activities have also been suggested to have a greater biomechanical specificity to sprinting as compared to lifting of free weights. Parametric generally have a similar ground contact times to the acceleration phase of the sprint as well. So parametric may have also induced a lower level of fatigue as compared to lifting of free weights, hence require a shorter rest period of just 0.3 seconds to up to 4 minutes for PAPE effect to be achieved. Furthermore, parametric conditioning activities only requires minimal logistic. It do not require specific skill set, and it could activate several muscle groups simultaneously, and it can be performed quickly. So with parametric conditioning activity, it has shown to improve jump performance, sprint performance, as well as sport-specific performance such as the judo, tennis, track and field throws. So the use of loaded counter movement jump have also shown to enhance jump performance for an extended period of up to 6 hours. Variable resistance can also be used on its own to induce a PAPE effect by performing sport-specific dynamic movement, such as the roundhouse kick with bands, performing a resistant band pull that mimic the entry phase of a judo throw or a freestyle stroke. The resistance level are stated to be the resistance that individuals are able to execute the movement through the full range of motion. So none of these studies actually listed the optimal resistance to be used. So by performing variable resistance on its own, have led to an increase in the kick velocity, increase in the number of throws, and also the decrease in the swim timing. So using variable resistance as a conditioning activity could be a viable option in situations where there is no access to free weights, such as at a competition venue, and it can be used to mimic the movement. They are highly sport specific as well. So there are some study that we have done at SSI with regard to PAPE. As mentioned, there was no recommendation as to what should be the optimal resistance to be used when variable resistance is used on its own as a conditioning activity. So my colleague and I have conducted a study to compare the different variable resistance to be used for loaded counter movement jump on inducing a PAPE effect. So this video will show you how the loaded jump can be done with bands. So we use the Sang band and compare for conditions, the unloaded jumps and the loaded jumps with orange band, which is a light resistance level. The red band is a moderate resistance, and lastly the blue band, which is the heaviest resistance level. So what we found is that all conditions have resulted in an increase in jumping performance of 2.5 to 5.5%. However, only the orange band, which provided resistance level of about 9.1% of subject's body weight, has a small to moderate effect size as compared to other conditions. Hence, we concluded that performing loaded plyometric has resulted in a greater PAPE effect, and also an added load of close to 10% body weight would be optimal resistance to be used for loaded plyometric. Another study was also done on our national judo athletes to find out the effect of the warm-up protocol to be used. So the upper and lower body PAPE condition activities include 2 sets of 5 reps of standing board jump, plus 2 sets of 5 reps of the resistance band pull, as shown on the picture above. While the lower body PAPE conditioning activity includes 3 sets of 5 standing board jump, and this compared to the usual, the control condition will be just having the athletes to do their usual competition warm-up routine. So the resistance level of the band used are the resistance level that the participants are able to pull through for the whole range of motion. So the upper and lower body PAPE conditioning activity has resulted in a higher peak power in the high pull test as compared to the control condition. And there's an overall increase in the number of throws in the special judo fitness test when the lower body and a combination of upper and lower body PAPE conditioning activities are being performed. So in this video, I will show you what are the PAPE protocol that I use with my Taekwondo athletes. So this is banded punches, banded kicks. As you can see, I do it on the front leg, which is a very common movement in the competition now. And lastly, with the loaded counter movement jump for the maximum lower body power. So in this phase, I actually use just about 1 to 2 sets of 3 to 5 reps of the movement. Okay, and it's mainly done by using bands, which can be used in competition venues, and it can mimic the sport-specific movement. So some take-home messages. So in order for us to maximize performance, we have to make sure that the warm-up is well-structured and progressive and addresses the physiological, the skill, and also psychological aspect. And it should include high-intensity sports or skill-specific exercise, which can be done using the conditioning activities that induce PAPE effect. So talking about PAPE effect, we know that there are different modalities that can be used, but you have to make sure that different considerations have to be considered for each modalities. And in order for one to work, it has to be individualized to suit the demand of the sport. With this, I've come to the end of my presentation. If you wish to connect, here's my email address. Thank you.
Thank you, Siow Ee, for showing us how warm-ups, which sometimes can feel very monotonous or a little monotonous, can be varied and individualized based on our needs. So, we have a few questions in the question box here right now. So, the first question by Sarah. She asked if we can use animal flow for activation and mobilization. So I actually went to Google what animal flow is because I'm not too sure what it is. I'm sure Siow Ee knows what it is. But basically, it's just a groundwork-based kind of bodyweight program focusing on animal style movements. So yeah, Siow Ee?
Yeah. Yeah. I think animal flow movement is actually very good. Yeah. And we do use it for our motivation, mobilization and activation phase as well. So what I use in my protocol, like the example I showed just now, is like inchworm and also the bear crawl. Okay. So other example that I use in my other athletes, for example, the frog hops. Okay, either to the front or to the side. Okay, and some tiger crawl, scorpions. Okay. So if you want to see more of this example, you can actually go to my colleague YouTube channel, Kelvin. Okay, Kelvin actually have an exercise library that have shown some that shows out this example of like the animal flow that can be used for activation and mobilization. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go and find what the account name is and then add it into the chat box or Q&A box later. We have a second question from Benjamin. So he asked that there are many different things that can be done in warm-ups with all the examples you have shown. But then in your own experience, is there any detriments from warm-up that maybe take a longer time, like 20 to 30 minutes? For example, loss of force output or mental fatigue or any other possible unintended results?
Okay. Yeah. Usually I wouldn't keep my warm up very long. So the protocol that I usually use, right, is mainly less than 20 minutes. Okay. So what I do is that just really focus on what is the movement pattern or the muscle activation that's required for the sport itself, or what is going to be required for the session. So I don't just jump up everything that I showed just now. Okay, really pick and choose. Okay, what is going to be more relevant to the sport after that. Okay. So what I realized on the ground is actually not a warm-up protocol that's too long, rather is something that's too short. So what I realized for athletes, even at the elite level, they can be just doing like some jumping jacks, after that do some static stretching, and then go into their their sport itself. Okay, so I don't really realize like there are a lot of people that are doing warm-up protocol that's like too long in duration. Okay, but general guideline, I'll just keep it within like 20 minutes. Okay, really keep it to like more sport specific. Okay, the movement, the patterns that's going to be required, and not just jump out everything into the warm up protocol itself. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that in a lot of situations that you have weakness or a lot of situations that you have like saw training happen, actually the warm-up session is much shorter. So that's the problem instead of it being too long.
Yeah, mainly so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we have another question from Sarah. She asked, I'm assuming it's a she, sorry if it's a he. But then yeah, the question is, what is the optimal time gap between a RAM warm-up and a race during the competition?
I would say it's really highly individualized. Okay, so even for like a PAPE protocol that was like being researched on, like you can have rest intervals of between 1 minute to even up to like 8 minutes. Yeah, so it really depends on the individual. I will give a general recommendation of probably around 5 to 8 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so once again, what I'm hearing is that a lot of the things would be dependent on the athletes themselves, the phase you're at, or even like the expectation or the purpose of the warm-ups. Oh, just a little comment on the side chat box. The YouTube account and the link that Siow Ee has mentioned previously by Kelvin Chua is in the chat box, so you guys can take a look afterwards. I think we have time for one or two more questions. A question by myself
Okay.
is that because a lot of the videos you showed, right, the athletes are all just like normal fitness, etc. But then if they're injured, will you recommend a dynamic warm-up or would static warm-ups be enough for them?
I first have to understand like what do you mean by static warm up? Like is this just static stretching or?
Yeah, so just static stretching instead of like because you showed the videos of them moving around and then having to do like the stop, break, etc. So yeah, more of would doing those dynamic warm-ups actually be beneficial for them, or would static warm-ups be enough? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Actually, it really depends on how serious the injury is, or even the location of the injury, and yeah. So it depends on whether they are actually returning to sport already or like just training in the gym. So, for example, I just give a scenario. So if I have an athlete that's coming to the gym and he has an injury on the knee, which is like mainly lower body, so so what I get him to do maybe is just mainly focus on the upper body and also the core work. Okay, but that doesn't mean that I will not just ask him to do static stretching, then come into the gym session itself. Okay, so we have to realize that the session, the movement that we're going to perform, right, is still going to be dynamic in nature. Okay, so what I can ask him to do, right, so instead of doing all the running, all the locomotor patterns, so maybe I can just ask him to get onto the bike, stationarily bike. Okay, so just cycle for like 5 minutes or something. So okay, so it's not going to be like just static stretching, stretch, and go to the gym itself. Yeah. So the movement after that is still going to be quite dynamic. So um, I would think I will still supplement that with some like bike or some things that can like more weight bearing, so that it can still raise the key physiological parameters as mentioned. Yeah.
So it's more of the intensity. It's more of the intensity rather than whether it's dynamic or static lah.
Or the different methods, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, with that, I would like to thank you, Siow Ee, for
Yep.
sharing more about warm-ups. I think it's something I would say some people will neglect or not be as focused on. But then now that with your sharing, we know how varied and how important it can be for all the athletes lah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So right now, we are also gonna flash the QR code again for you to show, write your feedback for Xiao Yi. And yep. So it is now 12 p.m. We hope you're hungry, and I know you are.